Okay, I think we might be live or recorded live. Hi, Anne.
Hi, Marianne.
So everybody, this is my co-author, Anne Walsh, for The Shadow of a Bassman. You guys get to see me a little bit more if you've been following our videos that we've been putting up. My name is Marianne Howard, and we decided we're going to start doing these little chats with everybody to get to know you and you to get to know us and where we're coming from regarding the author being the authors of the book, The Shadow of a Bassman.
So welcome, everybody. We're very excited to get this started and to share our research with you. So if you have any questions, you know, we are always open to answer those questions, and we're always here.
Yeah, we have a email account. Anybody wants to ask us questions, theshadowofabasseman@gmail.com. That's probably the best way to keep that organized. We are on social media, but I mean, you know, if you have any questions.
So, Marianne, would you like to share with our readers how you got started with...
Yeah, you want me to be the one to start this off. Yeah, this is a long, we're all long roaders. I mean, because this has been going on for 55 years almost. So, yeah, I've been a Paul person, all my life. Well, since I was six in the Ed Sullivan Show, right?
Right.
I'm that old. But it was, and of course, everybody knows we all have our favorite Beatle. Paul was mine, always has been. It was 2 years ago, July 4th, that one of the main Beatle researchers from another Facebook group that I didn't really know but knew me called me on my phone. And it was just weird because, you know, she called me. It was the day before what would have been my son-in-law's 28th birthday. We lost Ryan 2 years prior to that, so it's 4 years ago. She knew Ryan, knew my youngest daughter, Ryan's wife, who we lost 2.5 years ago. Both of them to fentanyl, just so everybody knows. This is hard for me. I'll get through this. But yeah. Ryan had his own band, was a composer, wrote all his own material. Megan sang with him a couple of times. One of their last recordings was with both of them. Pill Friends, if anybody wants to go out on YouTube, it's Pill Friends. He had a huge indigo, is it indie? That's what they call that, independent music in Philadelphia. Big following. Anyway, Lori, who called me, her husband was who taught Ryan how to play guitar. They've known him since he was a little boy. So she knew him and my daughter. And she told me that Ryan reminded her of Paul. And I was sitting there thinking, you know, when I first heard Ryan's music, it's not exactly the kind of music I would have normally listened to. I don't even know what you call it, but grunge maybe? I don't know. I thought he sounds British. You know, I was trying to figure out who it was he sounded like. I just never put it with Paul. He does remind me of Paul when I start listening to Paul's conversation, some words he does, and some of the I think it's his personality, the antics, the cheekiness. Ryan had some antics and he had that cheeky. But the revolver pictures with the glasses, I really see it. There's some of those pictures. So anyway, Lori's telling me how she even had told Ryan before he passed away that this was, she thought he reminded her of Paul, which he laughed off. He thought that was silly. So she started telling me this, and I'm like, you're kidding me. I just was like, what? So she had me watch a video, and It was one that was done back in 2016 with Mike Williams and Sophie Smallstrom. And very compelling video. I honestly think out of all the videos that are out there, that as an introduction, that's one of the better ones. So I watched that video and I called her back and I was like, holy crap. And now, and I know that since we've been both Beatle fans and Paul, there was definitely a change. We just didn't internalize the kind of change that it actually was. Nobody would have thought the rumor was true, that he was real, that he died in an accident or was murdered. And we'll get into Ann and I belief of it was more murder than it was actually an accident. We don't believe that it was an accident. So I called her back and we talked. Then I watched another video. I mean, this was an all-day thing, and it was the day before Ryan's birthday. So I think it was weighing on her, and I don't know exactly why she actually called me. I never asked her what made her compelled to, relay this to me, but it's sort of put me on that path. And I went, some people will sit there and research. They'll hear that Paul is dead rumors. We don't like that Paul is dead, but we'll use that. I know you don't like that word. But it is what they use out there. So some people will hear about it. They might do a little investigating and then they just let it go. I could not let this go. It's like it's something that, what's that word, phrase, it's stuck in my craw. It's just,
Exactly.
And, yeah. So I went full head on into, and I think you can attest to that. In 2 years, I've done a lot of research.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. And it's amazing how much you've
I cram into my head. It's gonna explode. I'm a very visual person. I do photography. I love doing photography. The comparisons are my thing. Looking at the pictures and maybe on one of these other, I don't have anything queued up for it today, but maybe on another video, we can just do picture comparisons and show what we're looking at and discuss that. But that's where I started. And then I went full head on into reading, looking at videos, watching pictures. I was blessed to have somebody who knows somebody that was a session musician. I won't get into names or anything, who gave me 18 hours of video. So I've told you about it. So it's great to have all those live recordings from back then, because you can see sometimes where the manipulation was, or there's so much manipulation out there in photoshopping and CGI and different things. But so I'll go ahead, Ann. You give everybody your background, which is even more detailed than mine, but not as.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a household that we had music on all the time. And we listened to everything in our house, from classical music to, big band to Irish traditional music, polka. My older sisters and brothers, they were into gospel and country music, classical, pop, disco,
Yeah.
So, and my mother played piano. So, music was very important in our family. And I missed all of Beatlemania. I wasn't born yet. I came a little later. But when I was 5 years old, my parents, they owned a little camp on a lake. And we used to go there every summer, and we had our radio with us, and we were listening to all the pop music on there. And I heard Band on the Run. And I was 5, and I heard that song, and I just thought that was the greatest song ever written.
Yeah, I love that song.
I love that song. And I didn't know who the artist was, but I was definitely intrigued, and I wanted to know. So as years went on, when I turned 11 years old, I met a friend. His name was Matthew, and he introduced me to the Beatles. And he played Strawberry Fields Forever for me, and I just was blown away how different that song was. And he showed me a picture of the Beatles from the Red Album, the 1963 photograph, the greatest hits from 63 to 66. And I saw the picture of Paul, and I couldn't believe my eyes, and I knew, okay, he's my Beatle. He's the one. And I asked him, Matt, who he was, and he said that was Paul McCartney. So I followed, Paul's career from the time I was 11 years old, and throughout my teenage years, I bought everything I could on them, from, their albums to books to any collectible I can get my hands on. And I was just a huge fan of his. And I knew about the rumor from reading biographies. And I believe that the rumor was just, a mistake. It was just an unfortunate thing that happened. I didn't take it seriously until 2011, when I saw The Last Testament of George Harrison. And at first I was blown away when I watched that. But after watching it a couple times, I thought, the timeline isn't quite right, And I started to pick out little discrepancies here and there. And then I thought, nah, the rumor's not true. It just cannot be true. I mean, this would be just totally devastating for the whole music community and fans, But, also growing up, one of my greatest passions are mysteries. I have this instinct that if there's a mystery out there, let me take a look at it. I want to see if I can solve it, So I was into everything from, JFK assassination early on in my life when I was about a teenager. Started with that, to paranormal, to 9/11, and just a bunch of other different mysteries and conspiracies, missing persons. So, taking up the Paul is dead rumor was just purely out of love for Paul McCartney and a love and appreciation for the Beatles music, and just a pure interest to know the truth. And I think everybody's on that path sometime where they want to know the truth about something. And I definitely want to know the truth about this. So after I finished some research on 9/11, which helped stage my research into Paul, that and JFK being a great passion of mine, I got to realize that, there's definitely could be something here. And I dove into it about 2012, 2013. And 6 months into my research, I was convinced that, something could have happened. I don't want to really face this. And then after a year of pure research, I just came to the conclusion, something did happen to him, and it was drastic. And horrible. So that's how I got started. It's just a love for Paul and want to know the truth.
Yeah. And we're both alike in that. We both love reading murder mysteries and, books. I mean, I was a reader early on, romance reader in my teens, and then more of a James Patterson murder mysteries, or, some of the other ones. Catherine Calder was one of my favorite FBI stories where, they had these twists and turns. So you sort of, and then I was a fraud auditor for years. So it's the same thing where you want to know, you got to get to the root of things. But books were always something, and I think this was the same for you. I always knew where they were going before they got there. You know, it's like somebody, you know, it's like watching a soap opera. I think most people, well, most women can relate to that. You watch a soap opera and you sit there, okay, 5 months from now, this is going to happen. And I always said I should be writing those soap operas because I already know what they're going to do before they do it. So anyway, yeah, we like these, figure out what's going on. And this was more of a passion for both of us to really figure out what the heck happened, because this is the person that we learned as an early age. We were both, you were 5, I was 6 when we found Paul.
Oh yeah.
And he was our, you know, child heartthrob, teen heartthrob, forever, whatever.
It was. But yeah. You know,
so, this was a devastating thing for both of us at the same time, because you're looking at it saying this makes sense, but you don't want it to be true.
Absolutely not.
So it's sort of like you look at it as, well, is this possible? And I think a lot of people, and if you do the research, you find out there were people that had done extensive, and we'll go there with the couple in Italy who did their research initially to prove that he was alive, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, absolutely. They wanted to set the rumor straight and prove that Paul was really Paul. The man we see today is really Paul McCartney, and it ended up showing different.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit, or?
We could probably go into that another time when we could talk about the discrepancies and the physical changes and things. But with our background, both being in mysteries, that was the setting for Shadow of the Baseman. You know, available on Amazon.
Yeah. So, and what would George say to that? Go buy it now. Yeah. George just popped into my head, and that's what happens with us a lot of times. But there was an interview where he was asked about a recording, and he says, "Yes, our new recording. It's out on Parlophone. Go buy it now." Just so deadpan with George. It's George, you know.
Yeah, it's gotta love him.
I think anybody watching these videos are gonna know. They're gonna know their guys. They're gonna know their Beatles and how they act and what they say and things. So, yeah, these things happen to us. Synchronicities. Just so everybody understands, we get a lot of oddities coming our way when it comes to our research. I don't know if oddities is a good word, but for me, it's more intuition and synchronicities. It's something will hit me and I'll be thinking about it, and it'll just keep popping up over and over and over again. Whether it's on the TV, it's on a YouTube, it's on the radio, something. And you get different.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how well we work together. Seeing how we're about 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, Marianne, come on over.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a drive for us. So when you see
for me, it was a bit of a drive.
Exactly. So when these things happen, it astonishes me, because I'll be on the same page you are, or you're on the same page I am. And it's like, okay, this is what we need to write then. And that's our next chapter.
Just so everybody understands what we're saying. And because we're writing the sequel right now. And we just did this week, you know, yesterday or the day before. We were going over the next chapter. And I was like, Anne, what do you think of this? Anne's like, Miriam, what do you think of this? And it's like, oh my God, that's what we were both thinking the same thing at the same time. And that's how we wrote the first book. I think.
Great.
Yeah. So maybe we should get into how we met, because we're giving this is our foundation video of the Marianne and Anne and Marianne thing. Whatever, how we came to be and how we came to do this book, because it's just another synchronization of the universe coming down for us, I think.
Yeah, we met through a mutual friend on Facebook.
Yeah. So what happened is, and I can tell you guys exactly, I can't remember the exact date specifically. It was the beginning of May. So it was 2020, last year. We're all in lockdown. I was watching, was last year. Yeah, it was last year. Seems like it's been a while. It seems like we've known each other forever. And we might have, in another life. But in 2020, I was watching Survivor on TV on my laptop. I was scrolling and I had Shirley's post was on my laptop when I got a FaceTime call from Shirley. And for everybody who's watched my videos on here that were not on Beetle topic, but on other topics, Shirley has been the co-host of some of those videos. So she FaceTimed me. I didn't know her then. And I was just blown away that there again, it was one of those things. She's on my computer and she's calling me at the same time. That just freaked me out to no end. And we had a long conversation about John. It was right after Astrid had died. So we were also talking about her. For anybody who doesn't know, Astrid was with the Beatles in Hamburg and Stu Sutcliffe's love. And by the end of the phone call, she said, Marianne, I think you and Ann, my friend Ann Walsh, you guys need to get in touch. You guys need to become friends. Mm-hmm. And she gave me Ann's phone number, I believe. So I called Ann. This was on a Wednesday. I think I called her on Saturday. We must have been on the phone that weekend, most of the weekend.
8 hours.
8 hours at least.
I remember it well.
I was with Lori. I was on the phone with her for hours off and on, but I was watching videos. But you and I were on the phone straight, going over, what do you know? What do I know? We knew a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So that's how we met. I've known Shirley for 4 years, and we met on Facebook also. And before I met Marianne, I was actually following her in some of the research groups on Facebook. And I was like, wow, I'm really impressed. This girl really knows stuff. And so
I am very vocal in the Paul's Facebook pages. I didn't know Ann because Ann's there, but she holds back until she wants to let something roll.
Then watch out.
Then watch out.
Yeah, I'm pretty quiet. I'm just kind of a quiet person that way anyways. So
so Ann sort of knew who I was before I knew who she was because she was following my posts.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I had read Diana Hammond's book, Times Two, that you edited, and I really enjoyed that book. So I was happy to meet you.
Thank you.
You have great ability. I mean, you have tremendous writing ability, I think. I respect you for that. It's really great.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you're easy as
we're going to say that. We're in the Mutual Admiration Society on that kind of stuff. And just so everybody knows too, I mean, like Ann said, we're 1,000 miles apart. Well, 900, I think. More than 900 and something. So we wrote the book last year. I'll go to that first. We wrote the book last year. We had known each other since, so let's say it was the beginning of May. And then it was maybe the second or third week in June where we decided to start.
I started getting the idea for Shadow of the Baseman June 10th. It was about a week before Paul's birthday when these ideas started popping into my head. And I started writing. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know where this was going. I had no idea. This information was just flowing, and I was just writing away.
Yeah.
So
paperback writer is in our heads. We always wanted to be a paperback writer.
Would you read our book? Definitely.
Yeah. So it was funny because Ann's thinking we should write a book. And she was talking about her research, and I sitting there saying, Anne, we should put your research into a book. So we were on the same wavelength. The boys help us in all sorts of strange ways. But
well, yeah, and then it was, you know, the way you want to go about writing it too. The best way to tell Paul's story, since we don't have all the information, and we're never going to have all the details, it just lost in time. And, you know, people are growing older and they're passing away and they're taking their secrets with them. So we're not going to have all the answers to what really happened. So we can only
surmise
and do our best we can to understand what he went through and put it into a novel fiction story. And Shadow of the Baseman is a historical novel. It's also a mystery and loaded with conspiracies. So yeah, I mean, the best way to tell the story that we could think of was to tell it in a fictional way, but had the book loaded with actual events that happened.
Actual stories. And in her developing of research over the 10 plus years, has unearthed a lot of pre-66 material. So when we look at pre-66 material, we know that this is not fabricated in any way, because it's Paul's, in our belief, Paul is still alive. So those are real interviews. Those are real pictures. Not all of them have been, you know, some have been tampered with a little bit, but not the interviews. So we have a lot of stories that she had in some of her books. Here's a good one. I think I'll have it. I have this pulled up. This is one you used, I believe, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great book. If you want to learn, if you want to learn a little bit about their history, there's some great stories in there that you just don't hear anymore.
Pictures in the middle too. You can, guys, look at this. Look how these pages. They're yellow. This is an old book. Has their signatures all on the back. It's pretty cool. But yeah.
1964.
1964.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of stories that I think we wrote in The Shadow of a Baseman. Mostly came out of that book, right? Some of them
did. Yeah. Some of them. Yeah, there's a couple of original biographies that I was able to collect from 64 that I was able to draw some of those small stories about them and just create a dialogue around, you know, an event that happened.
Yeah.
You know, like them in Hamburg or playing in pubs in Liverpool and things. It's nice to have those stories because you really get to understand that these guys are really close.
Yeah.
Which nowadays, I think the narrative leans towards more to there was infighting. We're the Beatles. We were never really that close.
Yeah.
Really?
Their egos and everything. They didn't have any egos back in those early days. They were just lads. They were just their friends. They were mates.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're very close. Very close. Yeah, brotherhood bond. I think the four of them had.
Yeah. Had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
The Shadow of the Baseman is based on an actual rumor, as we were talking about, of his death in 1966. So, unlike the common narrative that we have today, the Americans did not create this rumor when it broke in 1969. It actually was around. It started in London in September of 1966. And we know this because in Tony Barrow's book, John Paul, George, Ringo, and Me, he talks about this. And he states that in the middle of September 1966 in his office, Tony Barrow was the press officer for the Beatles at the time. So he was getting an unusual high number of phone calls from the press inquiring about a car accident that Paul was in, and if he was alive or dead, they wanted to know. And so many calls coming into Tony's office that it really alarmed him and made him concerned about it. I mean, there's always rumors about each beetle going around all the time, but he said this was very unusual. So he ended up calling Paul, and Paul said, "No, I'm fine. I'm at home."
And this was when?
In the middle of September, mid-September, 1966. So if you want to divide that, somewhere between September 10th and September 20th is when.
Right. But where I wanted to go was, I think that all those phone calls also are what triggered the broadcast on the first show of the Monkees, which a lot of people here say, okay, because it was on the Monkees, that's the day because it was a news broadcast. But it was never heard. That was like, I've never seen it ever since.
Right. I've never seen it either.
Yeah, I didn't. It's nothing that made the news. It was, and I actually was watching that show. I don't remember seeing it. I think I would have been mortified if I had seen that, because that time when that show came on, I was probably 8. So, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify, because I think that the rumor and the phone calls generated from the press might have spurred that that leak to having that show up on that show, but then quickly taken down as not factual.
So that's where that rumor started. So then we know that Paul took off for Paris about the 16th of September. So that even narrows the window a little bit more as to when those phone calls started coming into Tony's office, somewhere between the 10th and the 16th.
Right.
So in order for him to call him at home. So we know that at the time John was away in Spain making How I Won the War, his film. We know also about the 15th or so of September, George takes off for India, and he's studying the sitar, and he's there for 6 weeks. So that takes him, George, from middle of September, right up until the end of October. And Ringo was in London. So that's what we know as of so far. And then on September 18th, the Sunday Times features an interview with Paul. And so it's kind of hard to, we don't know exactly when Paul gave that interview, but he would have to have given that interview, obviously, before he left for Paris to see John, when he took a little break from filming.
Right. And Paul at the time was working in the studio by himself, working on a sound score for the movie The Family Way.
That's right.
Right, yeah. Before he went, but we don't know exactly studio time for him. I don't believe that's in there, but he was working on it before, from the beginning of September into whenever. We, yeah.
This is why we believe that Paul's death happened in November versus September. So I've been able to track him until about October 7th. And then, honestly, I lose track of him because there's no photographic evidence shows up to document that, okay, Paul's here. Here's his photograph.
Right.
The newspapers were just mentioning that Paul was in the studio working on The Family Way. And they were getting that from Brian Epstein.
Yeah.
And going into October, because people started to wonder where he was. He wasn't being seen out in public.
Which is not normal for Paul. He would always show up at a premiere, a book store or something, out running, he was that out in the London scene, so to speak, a little bit more so than the other ones because they were living out of the city at the time, and Paul was still right there.
Right. He was living in London, and the other three were out in the country, so they're about 45 minutes away from London.
Right.
So Paul wanted to stay in London to, be in the London scene and see what was out there, artistic, and keep up with stuff. So there was a panic as to people wanted to know where he was, and this is a guy that was followed everywhere he went. All four of them were, obviously, people wanted to know where they were, and yet he is not around.
Right.
Come October, we don't know really. We only have assumptions that he was in the studio and he was working with Donovan, Mellow Yellow, but we don't know for sure. There's no pictures.
There's no video. They were at Abbey Road Studio doing that, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
Supposedly. But there's so many, there's no, I don't believe there's any film evidence of that.
No, not that I have uncovered yet, or any that I've seen yet.
Yeah. If anybody finds any, we'd be glad to share with us.
Yeah, please do. If you want to share anything with us, please get a hold of us. That'd be wonderful.
Right.
So when Tony Barrow finally just, releases the news that Paul was still alive and with us, and they're, everything's okay, because the press couldn't find him, then other rumors started flying around that, he married Jane Asher, his girlfriend, his long-term girlfriend. And then when they denied that, then it was, Paul's breaking up the Beatles and he's leaving. So that started, a whole new panic because, Beatle fans don't want them to break up. So on October 3rd, Brian Epstein had to come out in public and announce that the rumors of Paul is not true and that the Beatles are staying together. They just aren't sure what they want to do yet. So Brian was trying to put a stop to the rumors going around. But I think Paul was still with us because on October 7th, John gave an interview to Look magazine where he said that he couldn't wait to get back to London and work with Paul again. And he's really looking forward to writing songs with him again. So that's why I believe I can track him until then because of that interview. And then I just lose him. I just cannot find him.
Well, there is the one time, the end of October. What was that? The Halloween party or the masquerade or something?
The IT party, International Party.
Yeah, and supposedly Paul was there as an Arabian disguise, but we don't believe that was Paul.
No, I don't believe that was Paul. I found some documentation that Paul again left to see John in Paris on October 13th. And the IT party was about that time too. It was on the 15th.
Yeah.
So Paul can't be in Paris and in London at the same time.
Right. So somebody, just so you guys know, was in London pretending to be Paul when he's in Paris.
Dressed as an Arab. So
dressed as an Arab. So nobody knows for sure, but yeah.
Right. So I think that's when we start to see that blending of Paul's history with possibly the replacement coming in, Billy coming in. Is in that October 66 time frame.
Just so everybody knows, if they haven't watched our videos before and they haven't read the book yet, the person who is replaced Paul goes by Billy. I mean, that's his real name. We've have video where people call Paul Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's out there. Interesting.
Yes. Very, very interesting.
So we definitely do distinctions. I am not into, and neither is Anne, that we call Paul by anything else other than his name. And you know what I'm talking about, Anne.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy is Billy. I do the distinction. Some people will sit there and call Paul Paul, and they call Billy Sir Paul because he was the one that was knighted afterwards. But I don't even like doing that. Billy is Billy as far as I'm concerned. He's not Paul. He's Billy.
And that's what we'll use.
Yep.
His replacement is Billy, and that's what we'll use. That's not a problem.
Nope.
So, yeah. Well, that's where we are in the research. So that's why we believe that the event took place in November.
Right.
9th.
Yeah. And to going to that date, we have Mao showing up at Paul's house and firing Paul's butler, maid, whatever, housekeeper.
Yes. November 19th.
Yep.
Yeah, when he returns from Kenya, from his trip with Mao to Kenya. He left on November 6th. I've seen documentation he left on the 6th, and I also see documentation that he left on the 9th.
Right.
So, again, there's another discrepancy as to exactly when he left, but sometime in that time frame.
He left. And who was it that actually left?
Billy left in Paul's 1966 Aston Martin that was green. And there are photographs of him, driving that car.
Yeah.
Through Europe, it's hard to take.
Oh, yeah, there's all sorts of documentation. All of a sudden, we don't see Paul for how long, and then all of a sudden now there's documentation, and there's photographs of the trip. But yeah, the photographs are a little telling when you sit there and compare September Paul and November Paul.
Yes. I think that's what convinces a lot of people.
Right.
Actually, you take, like, the photograph you have of Paul right behind you was taken in September of 66.
Yeah. This is Paul.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, his face didn't change that much in a month and a half. Well, I don't know when in September this picture was taken, but it was in September.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yep. So,
yeah, this is where we all take a deep breath. Everybody take a deep breath and say, oh, geez.
So, Marianne,
yeah.
I have received a few questions from some readers I thought you might want to go over.
Yeah.
And we welcome questions. We love it. So, please.
We do. So Anne shared these questions with me so that I can ask, or she can ask, however we want to do this. Some of these are similar I think in the same realm. And I believe it's because people that are now, they're trying to make sense out of this whole thing. And it's something that really, it's senseless. And it should have never have happened, but you try to. It's trying to make sense out of something that was it's so horrific, in my opinion.
Once you fall down the rabbit hole, you'll find out how horrific it really is. He was doing a lot behind the scenes of Beatlemania. People didn't know about it at the time, so it made him a target. And the Beatles were targets anyways, because there's always, somebody that doesn't like you for whatever reason.
So before we get into these questions, do you think we want to get into maybe some of the reasons why we think this happened to Paul? And because it might give them a better understanding of our answers to the questions that we're going to give anyway because of
Sure. We can just briefly touch on that. It's no problem.
yeah, some of them.
Yeah, so behind the scenes, Paul was doing a lot of political work. He was in a campaign to ban atomic weapons. Of course, over here in the United States, he was very pro-civil rights in a time of...
Yeah, and everybody, so you know, we're talking about the mid 60s, early, 64 to 66 is when they were really on the scene here in the States. And what was going on then? The Vietnam War, Kennedy assassination, segregation, busing. Can you think of anything else? Those are like, I think
those were the top ones at the time.
They're the top ones at the time. So, okay. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's great because
this is how we are. We're gonna start being more and more real, like as we go on.
Oops, sorry, I moved my table. My table slipped. Yeah, those were the main issues at the time, and they were vocal about every single one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I applaud them for doing that, for taking up such controversies and openly talking about these issues. So those are it.
Yeah, they were openly talking about the issues and having confrontations about them as well.
Yes. And
is this a thing where read the book and find out more?
No, I just like to go into more details.
Huh?
I would just like to go into more details maybe in another video.
Okay, that's fine.
But
that's the topics. Those are the key points. Actually, one of the questions I was thinking that was one of the questions that I heard was what made people think that, Paul was killed because of what was the reasons behind of it, but we're sort of touched on those just a little bit, we'll get in, like she said, we'll get into these more as we do more videos, which we're planning on trying to be a little bit more out there now and doing these videos ourselves.
Yeah, we'll go into the motivations.
Yeah.
Why he may have been eliminated for political reasons.
So, okay, I'm going to ask you the first question that we got because I can answer no already without, having even read the question to Anne yet, because no, I haven't. Have you searched for a death certificate?
Yes, I have, actually. This was quite a few years ago when you can actually go online and find birth certificates, death certificates, and public records for free. Now I've discovered you can't do that. You have to pay. But at the time I did, and I found Paul's birth certificate, no problem. I did not find a death certificate. I did not find any divorce documentation either. Or any marriage licenses.
Right.
For him.
Did you by chance look for acronyms?
I did, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've also looked under unknown persons around Liverpool in their cemeteries and burial grounds,
right,
church records and stuff like that, and I didn't find any death certificate.
Right.
I didn't find any, fake names that kind of threw up an alarm at me or anything like that. But just because there's not a death certificate doesn't mean that there wasn't a death.
Exactly. So that was going to be what I was going to say as the follow-up to this, because we are looking at this as being a obviously large cover-up.
At the highest level.
At the highest levels. So you're not going to be finding everybody that sits there and says, where's the death certificate? Where's the body? You know, we get that, you know, the people that first are looking at this as a topic. It's the first thing that they come up with. Well, where is he buried? Where's the body? They're not going to, they have somebody imitating him, pretending he's him and walking around in his suit, so to speak. They're not going to have public records. And if anybody thinks that the Crown or Scotland Yard or MI5 or the other agencies that are out there, I'm going to stick with those over there, and because it's over there. Yeah, they're not going to put that on record.
No, and they could also falsify records.
Yeah.
Too. The government can do anything they want.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of an attempt to falsify records, a death certificate. If everybody remembers George Harrison's death, it was on his death certificate that he died at a certain address out in California. And when people investigated it, it wasn't an address. He died in an open lot when he supposedly had died at a residence.
Yeah.
So, you know, after legal proceedings and everything, and the prosecutor got involved and, you know, the whole legal stuff, we discovered that George actually died at Billy's house. Why cover that up?
Especially on a death certificate, it's after the fact. I know that they waited a couple hours to release his death because they wanted to get Olivia and Danny and whoever was there out of the house and on their way to wherever they were going. I believe they didn't stick around.
George was cremated and his ashes were taken to India. Right.
So what was the reason for putting on a fake address? And a lot, no less. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. But
and we also have John Lennon's. Also,
yeah,
it's his autopsy report.
Not right.
It's not right. It's not complete. It has omissions in it, and I think it's, you know, it's lying by omission. You know, on the death certificate says he died from multiple gunshot wounds, but it doesn't tell you were those wounds entry wounds or exit wounds.
Exit wounds, right?
There's a huge difference in an investigation. You have to know those, and those are omitted.
Just so everybody knows, we have those documents, so it's not like we're, you know, we've looked at this. It's something that's going to be it's going to be in the nonfiction book that we are going to do at some point. We're working on it. That's going to be huge. I told Anna it's probably got to be 2 volumes because you guys got to know there's so much. We're not talking about a year in somebody's life. We're talking decades now of information. John's death is a major component of some of the research that's been compiled and going to be in our sequel to this book. Written in that historical way, but also in the nonfiction.
Right. So the ER doctor who examined and took care of John when he came in said that he had 7 bullet wounds, but his autopsy report doesn't show that. It's just multiple gunshot wounds.
And how many rounds are in Mark David Chapman's gun?
His .38 snub-nose revolver holds 5 bullets, and he said he missed the first time. So that leaves
that would be 4. Yet there's 7 wounds.
7 wounds. And the main wound was
Just
large.
put that together, people. Start thinking.
And the main wound was large, and that's what severed his artery to his heart.
Right. And the main wound being large would have been at a closer range as opposed to the first shot that was missed, and now John's running. There's other aspects going on in that
Yeah, we'll go into that too.
Yeah. We can go into all sorts of things. It'll be, we're not looking for material when it comes to the Beatles and this whole mystery.
I mean, as much as I love Paul, I also love John George also. So, yeah, that's very important too, to this whole Paul McCartney mystery.
The brothers.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question. What was the reaction from Paul's parents?
Well, Paul was very close to his father. They were very close. Paul was the apple of his father's eye, so to speak. So I would imagine, like any parent that loses a child, it's devastating.
Yeah.
We don't know. We just don't know. But we can tell you that Mr. McCartney did remarry in November 1964 to Angie Williams, and she had a daughter named Ruth, who was 4 years old, and Mr. McCartney adopted Ruth. And Paul took her in as his own little sister and was very good to her, bought her gifts, toys, clothes, whatever. Took her places, did things with her. When he went to the Bahamas to film Help in February '65, he took his family. He took his father, his stepmother, and his stepsister. So I would say that they were very close-knit family.
Yeah.
And I would imagine
that time, and at that time, Paul would go home a lot on weekends as well.
Yes. Angie McCartney mentions this in her book, The Long and Winding Road, that Paul was very faithful, and he would come home every weekend to be with his family when he was not on tour or out of the country, obviously. Yeah, so very close family. I'm sure it was devastating.
Yeah. And as a parent who, as I just mentioned, lost my daughter and my son-in-law. Hold on. Hold on. Fill in the blanks there, Ann.
Okay. Well, Marianne is receiving a very important phone call. She is having a special delivery made. So I'm hoping it's the delivery guys on their way for her. So she should be back in just a second. There she is. All right. No, you're still muted.
I know. I had to find my mouse to find the mute. Okay. So just so everybody knows, Ann said, we're real people. I got a washer and dryer the other day that had broken doors on it. So they're delivering it today on a Sunday. So go figure. So we're probably going to have to pause the video at some point in a little bit and then start it back up again. If I have to do 2 sections, I'll do 2 sections, but we'll keep on going in the in-betweens. Yeah, so what I was saying, it was very hard, very, very hard. I actually lost time when I was dealing with Megan. I actually found her. So you just can't know what that's like. So when we were writing about Jim's reaction in the book, I knew how he was going to be. It's his son. Mm-hmm. People will sit there and say, but then if that's the case, why didn't he say something, do something, let people know that this happened? And if everybody looks at it in the context of who we're talking about, the Beatles were the income for Britain at the time, right?
Yes, they were the largest export.
Yeah. So whether they told the others in the band that, we have to carry on because we're under contracts, we don't know what they said. We don't know what, whatever.
Well, I think one thing we could agree on is there was a lot of manipulation.
Yeah.
A lot of lies were told to them. Let's carry on and let's finish Paul's work for him. Let's finish his music for him. Let's do this, that for him.
And we do believe that a lot of the music that was written after the fact or before was recorded after the fact. We can get into that in a whole nother show as well. I mean, like I said, we're not suffering for material. But anyway, so yeah, we don't think, the next question was, why do you think the other members never told the press? I think this is all the same answer. They can't tell. NDAs were done, non-disclosure agreements. They're very prevalent in the industry on different topics. This would probably be a huge one for them. Right? I mean, that's what we're
Yeah, they were also members of the British Empire. So they were forced into that. I think Brian Epstein, their manager, kind of manipulated them into that. They didn't know what they were entering at the time. And I believe it's a secret society of some sort of elite globalists. So you're locked into a secret society, a secret brotherhood, and you can't give out any secrets. You can't. It would be treason.
Treason.
And at the time, the punishment for treason is death.
So everybody knows in context, they got their MBEs in October of 65, a year prior. So any acts that were done contrary to the crown and their wanting to, however, it's against them.
If you go against their agendas, that makes you a target.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. So, okay.
So that's why they never were able to tell the press, but in their own way they did. And you have to read between the lines of some of their interviews that they do. And they still put it in their music and their backward masking. So they didn't directly say it, but they said it in their own way, so to speak.
Right. And that goes to the third question. Why do you think the other members never told the press? Because they couldn't. The NDAs they're in, being a member of the British Empire, their contracts, whatever that was held over their heads. But John, being John, and a wordsmith, we all know what a brilliant mind he had when it came to that kind of thing, that he put it out there. People sit there and say, oh, well, those clues were just out there. They were a publicity stunt. They were this and that. Seriously, how would you put that many clues as a publicity stunt? For 3 years, from 3 years in the past to a publicity stunt in 69.
And then continue it.
And then continue it in their solo careers. All 3 of them. 4 of them.
If you want the rumor to go away, then don't
stop it.
Clues in your music. They didn't want the rumor to go away.
They didn't want the rumor to go away. They wanted to tell. Even Billy tells.
Yes.
Billy tells all the time. People start looking at it through the eyes of him being someone else telling. His newest video. I can't help it. I mean, that newest video just came out. He is in the background as his older self, with a younger self coming out, which would be in that Paul realm of 64 to 66 type of age, doing his moves and dancing and doing the song. To get to the end, and there's a lot of coding in that song, of messaging in that song, different things. To get to the end of the video, and the younger Paul takes his head down and pulls off a latex mask and shows a reveal of someone else. Hello, Billy Shears. You know?
Right. Exactly.
If he didn't want this to continue because he wants people to know his work for him, he wouldn't do something like this and keep this rumor going. He puts fuel on the fire all the time. Anyway, we went into that fourth question was, what is the number one reason you think Paul is dead? And we sort of touched on that a little bit. Paul was very much into researching the Kennedy assassination. For anybody who didn't realize that. And that could probably have been a big target as far as, obviously, the Warren Commission and different things coming out and trying to hide what many feel was a hit on our president. An assassination was made, but do we really think it was a lone shooter? I think over the years that's been expanded upon many, many times over.
And we still question it today. We're still looking at it today. And we still don't have the answer, the definite answer as to what happened to our president.
Right. And Paul met with one of his President Kennedy's advisors.
Mark Lane.
Mark Lane. So, okay. Do you want to expand on that anymore, or do you want to keep that for another video? We're going to keep it all for another video.
Well, I think what solidifies it for me is just the motivations that I've seen and his political point of views that made him a target. And that really solidifies it for me. Knowing other events that have happened over the decades, it all makes sense. He was defiant, rebellious against establishment. They all were. So that made him a target. So it's just a matter of all the circumstantial evidence that I have accumulated that brings me to the conclusion that, yes, something happened to him and he died.
Right.
He had to be eliminated because it goes against the agendas.
Okay, so the next question was, why was Paul an only child? And if not, what were the reactions of his siblings? So Paul wasn't an only child. He has a brother, Mike, and we talked about Ruth being a stepsister. So again, I'm looking at, they had to have been devastated as well. It's their brother, for goodness sakes. But can they say anything? No, they can't. They sort of did a little bit. Like you said, Ruth maybe a couple times, maybe had some. I mean, just like everybody else, I think they all have little tells here and there.
Yeah. They talked about how, that close she was to Paul until 67. And then when she was about 7 years old, which would have been 1967, he changed. His personality changed. So that's a little bit of a, wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
But in 1991, she released a song. She was actually, during the 80s, she was very popular in Europe as a singer and performer.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote a song called I Will Always Remember You, and she dedicated it to her father, Mr. McCartney, and to Paul. So she will always
Paul, who she hadn't been close to for a while, like you said.
Right. They
years.
Yes, for at least 20 years from the time that song was written in 91. They had they didn't have much to do with each other.
Right.
It was like, so yeah, that was after Mr. McCartney died in 76. Then pretty much their relationship disappeared. He didn't have anything to do with her. But in the song, I Will Always Remember You, it's a nice song, and she dedicated it to Paul.
Did you want to go through any of that now, or?
Oh, well, I have right here is her, there it is her CD. I bought that. It's a very nice song.
Do you want me to pull up the lyrics? Or do you just want to?
Yeah, that's all right.
All right.
Yes.
So the next question we had was, do you think Ringo will ever have the guts to come forward with the truth? I'm quoting the fan who asked us that question.
Will Ringo come forth?
Yeah.
No.
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 And again, guys, he's a member of the British Empire. He's been knighted.
Yes. Yes.
And who helped him get his knighting?
Billy.
Billy. Because Ringo hadn't been knighted like the rest of them.
And who helped Ringo get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Billy.
The solo artist. Yes, Billy.
Oh.
So, I don't think so.
No.
We may never actually know.
You know, as we start getting into these later years, it's hard to say because, like I said, now he just came out with another video that tells. There's other things out there. I mean, if you guys go, we brought up Band on the Run. Both of us love, you know, that album. Band on the Run and Venus and Mars, I think, were my favorite Paul video or albums from his past solo career. Band on the Run. The first one said Paul. To the second one there, Billy. I hope you're having fun. Because Paul is not having fun, obviously. He's been replaced. And that's the band that's on the run. So
I could actually see John saying that to Billy at some point.
Yeah, hope you're having fun, Tosser.
Yeah, exactly. Can you see him doing that? I could just hear it. Yeah.
You guys, when you read the books that we're writing, when we get into some of the banter, The Shadow of a Bassman on Amazon, when you get into some of the banter that we have dialogued, we did another video, one of our first videos where we were talking about Billy's first day in the studio and John flipping out on him for picking up Paul's guitar. And Angelo at the time said, I can hear that conversation happening. Well, we could too. You know, it just seems like you get to know your characters, and these are real life people that we've come to know how they talked with each other.
Yeah, you get to know them watching videos.
Yeah.
Going back and reading those interviews, and you get like, oh, he's kind of like this, and George is like that, Paul's like this. You know, I never ever thought that Paul was a prankster.
I know. It was always that we always thought that Paul was the one that they were pranking all the time, hitting him in the back of the head and whatever, you know, during interviews, you know, trying to, paybacks.
Right. Well,
we find out they're paybacks for earlier pranks that Paul had done on other people, John or Ringo or George, whoever.
Right. And in interviews, George said that, you know, people think that George was a quiet Beatle. Well, really, George said that was Paul, that was a quiet Beatle. And Paul would get him laughing during the interviews because he would say something, you know, quietly to George about something, and George would be laughing and cracking up, and everybody else is wondering, what are they laughing about? You know, tell us the joke. But it'd be some, you know, remark Paul made to George, and George loses it in an interview. So yeah, it's great stories. Going back reading those articles from 64, 65, and 66, how they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that was the last of those questions.
So thank you to Rhea and Mason for sending us some of their questions.
And yeah, Roseanne was another one. And yeah, whoever wants to send us questions, the shadow of a baseman at gmail.com. And we'll get on a video and answer those.
Great. And you can also find us on Facebook, Shadow of the Baseman.
Right.
It's our author page. Also, we have on Facebook, and we each have our own individual page.
Yeah, we're not shy. I'm on Facebook all the. I mean, who in this world of media is not on social media? And if you are on social media, you're on social media. You know what I mean?
Right.
We all have our phones. My phone. It's got all. It's actually it's the book. I love that picture. Anyway, yeah, we're out there. We're not hiding. We're not those kind of people. We're real people.
Yes, we are, and we're passionate Big Beetle fans like millions of others.
Yeah. So, is there anything else we want to hit on today, or?
I think we did a great job for the
we've actually been on for almost an hour and 15 minutes. So this is our first tell on here. When I first started talking about Megan and Ryan, I forgot to mention the fact that as we've been adding in characters into the book, they're real people characters, so to speak. The investigator in our book who's investigating Paul's murder is Ryan Wilson, who was my son-in-law. That's his name. My daughter's name is Megan, and she is Paul's romantic side. And Anne's best friend is one of our characters who, I don't know, you want to explain on that one? Because we gave him a different life. We didn't stick to the facts on that.
Yes.
It is
my friend, best friend, Connie, huge John Lennon fan. She's loved him since the age of 11. And I love Paul. So, so I just decided, let's have Connie marry John Lennon and kind of give him a different life. Because John ends up, adopting Paul's son, Paul
and Megan's.
So we could, Paul and Megan's son, Paul, just so that we can kind of continue the story. And now the second book is, Paul growing up and now discovering everything his father was doing, plus some, which goes into more detail than Shadow of the Baseman.
Yeah.
That just kind of lays the foundation of what happened to him in a fictional way. So now we have Paul's son, Paul Lennon, growing up and discovering more things about what was going on in the 60s and his father and the Beatles and everything else.
Right. He had to discover who he actually was first, and then from there learn more about what happened to his real dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, for many people that don't know, there are Paul children out there, two of which I know. And Anne knows and has actually done an interview with one. You did an interview with Stephen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know Stephen.
Yeah. So, it was using a different way of communicating, but an actual way of something that we actually know of Paul's kids. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. We'll discuss all that kind of stuff later. Maybe we'll have to have we'll be doing some interviews with people. Maybe that'll be one of them. Well, I hear beeps out in front of my house, so guess my washer and dryer is here. Woohoo!
Well,
hear
it's
it?
been great. Yes, I hear it. Well, it's been absolutely fabulous talking to you today and getting the book out there. And thank you to all the readers for their support. We truly appreciate this, and we're here for you.
Yeah, we want you guys to get to know what our motivation, where we coming up with the research, how we put this all together, because it is historical fiction. We do have to have stories. I know a lot of people sit there and say, well, why did that happen? Did this happen? Because I think that's a good compliment for us, because they actually feel that was done so well in our writing that it's real. You have to use discernment. So, all righty. I have a guy at my door.
Okay.
So I guess we're going to end the recording now, and I'll start back up.
Yes, we'll do another video.
Okay. All righty. All right. So please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and get this out for other people, as well as get the book on Amazon if you haven't done so already.
And contact us on Facebook.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.